Hey kids, let's talk about the good old days growing up in Idaho. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Growing Up in Idaho. Today we're going to be talking about the good old days of the 1960s era. And on the show today I have my dad, Mike Hicks, who was a deputy sheriff in Ada County, Boise, Idaho, back in the 60s. And he had a lot of experiences. He has a lot of stories to tell. And I want to capture the essence of life in the 1960s in Idaho, in Boise specifically. I remember that time as a child, but I think it would be interesting to get a perspective, kind of an overall perspective of what was going on and how people operated in those days. So we'd like to welcome to the show Mike Hicks. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about how you got started in police work in Boise.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Hicks, and I live in Springville, Utah. And I'm the father of Jeff Hicks, the one who's publishes this podcast and does this computer stuff. And he asked me to tell a little history about myself and then maybe a story or two from back in the days when I lived in Boise, Idaho. My wife and I moved to Boise and I got my bachelor's degree there. And
you went to Boise State?
Boise State College, and it became Boise State University while I was enrolled.
Okay.
And for part of the time that I was there, I was a deputy sheriff for the Ada County Sheriff's Department, which is headquartered in Boise. Boise is the county seat of Ada County. And I was a policeman there from 1964 to 1969. 1969, I resigned, and my wife and family and I moved to Salmon, Idaho, which was our hometown. And I became a school teacher, and that was the beginning of my career as an educator. I retired from that career in 2008. But getting back to my police years, I started out as a jailer in the Ada County Jail. Did that for a few months and then saw an opening to become a patrol officer and drive a police car around in Ada County, not just restricted to Boise, but also to in those days, the small town of Meridian, Eagle, Kuna, and a few other just small towns around the area. In those days, those cities hadn't started growing much yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, those are pretty large cities. Now Meridian is huge. And
yeah. And in fact, pretty much one city all the way from down around Kuna up to Meridian and then on into Boise, including Eagle.
Yeah.
It's all one great big metropolis, even though they're still separate cities and they have separate names and separate governments and all of that. There's still one big old city. You can drive all day through those and never go out of city. You're in town all the time.
Yeah.
So it's grown a lot. In my day, Boise had about 70,000 people, and I don't know what it is now, 200,000 or 300,000, I imagine. So
yeah.
Anyway, as I said, I hired out as the sheriff's office and became a police officer and a patrolman, and really enjoyed that work. If I hadn't been going to college and all my life from the time I was just little, wanted to be a school teacher someday, I probably would still be a policeman, although I'd be retired by now. But I would have probably stayed with that profession, except I wanted to try teaching, so I did, and turned out I really liked it, so I stayed with it.
What was police work like back in the 60s when you were involved with it, at least as from your perspective as a deputy sheriff?
Well, as I mentioned a minute ago, I was a deputy sheriff, which gave me law enforcement responsibility and authority over all of Ada County, including all the towns I mentioned and the countrysides and the ranches and the farms and everything to wherever the county line ended, which was out close to The county line was about halfway out to Mountain View, and then about halfway to some of the other towns in the other direction. Anyway, it was all around.
Yeah.
And police work was probably not quite as nerve-wracking in those days as it is now. We had our problems for sure, you know, and in the 5 years that I was a police officer in Boise, I had to disarm a couple of guys with guns and a couple of guys with knives and quite a few guys in fights and things. And you know, those little country bars out in the country didn't have any law enforcement. And these, you know, saloons, I guess they call them. So people would go out there and get drunk. And when people get drunk, about half the time they start wanting to fight somebody.
Yeah.
So we broke up a lot of bar fights, arrested a lot of people that way. A lot of traffic control, speeders and car wrecks, lots of car wrecks, especially on Friday and Saturday night when everybody get drunk, they'd go out and wreck their car. And so that was all pretty exciting stuff. In those days, police work about, 75% of the time was just kind of patrolling around, watching things and checking on things. And the other 25% of the time, it was pretty exciting. You would be involved in some pretty heavy duty stuff. So, you know, we still had our challenges and our exciting things that happened from time to time.
Who was the sheriff at that time, Dad?
Sheriff's name was Paul Bright, and I'm sure Paul has passed away by now because he was in his mid-60s at that time, and that's been a long time ago, back in the 60s, you know, so he'd be gone, I'm sure. But I had a lot of respect for Paul. He had been a Boise City policeman for a number of years and retired from that and went into another profession. And later on, he ran for sheriff, and he served 2 or 3 terms as sheriff. And I enjoyed working for Paul. He was a good, honest, religious guy who backed his officers and stood by them. And he made sure we were well trained, and we were allowed to make decisions and do the things that were hard to do. Paul knew that out there in the night, when you're out there by yourself as a police officer, you can't run and ask somebody, what do I do? You got to decide what you're going to do and then have whatever it takes to go ahead and do it in situations.
So just for some of our listeners who may be interested in the today versus then kind of thing, what types of equipment did you carry in those days to help you with your work? Well,
I carried a .357 Magnum revolver, 6-shot revolver, double action. And they don't carry those guns anymore because they're too big. Nowadays, policemen carry, most of them are a little bit lighter gun. Because in those, a .357 Magnum, if you would shoot somebody, that bullet's going to go a long ways before it stops. You could shoot a person right through the body and the bullet will go out their back and could hit somebody else.
Yeah.
And the guns they carry nowadays are designed on purpose that if you shoot somebody in the chest, which is where policemen are trained to shoot people, if you're going to shoot somebody, you shoot to kill and you shoot for body mass.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they still train you that way. And these guns nowadays, the bullet will stop inside the person you shoot. It won't go on through.
Yeah.
So in those days, the .357 Magnum put a bullet right through somebody. And then I carried a nightstick, which was about a 28-inch piece of hickory with a leather thong on one end that I could wrap around my wrist and use that to settle down drunks and people that wanted to fight and stuff. You hit somebody on the top of the shoulder right there on that muscle, or on the side of the arm right there on that muscle, or on the butt with a nightstick, and they're not gonna want to fight anymore. They're going to lay down on the ground and cry for a while.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I also carried a sap. I had a sap pocket right close to my holster. And the sap was a leather covered spring loaded thing with a lead ball on the end of it. That lead ball weighed 16 ounces. It's about the half as big as your fist. And it was covered with soft leather. And if you hit somebody on the head, which I did a time or two, right on the temple there, on the side of their head above one of their eyes, they'll go down. They'll be out cold. I hit a guy one time, knocked him out, and he was out for about an hour. It kind of scared me a little. I'm afraid I might have hit him too hard, but he was breathing okay. So I figured, he'll come to pretty soon. And finally he did.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had handcuffs that we'd cuff people with if we needed to.
Now, pepper spray wasn't quite a thing in those days, was it? You had mace
we had
tear
mace.
gas or whatever you called it.
Yeah. The last year or two that I was a policeman, we had mace, it was called. And it was a little aerosol can that looked like hairspray, only it was smaller. But instead of shooting a spray, it would shoot a stream like a squirt gun.
Yeah.
So you could pick some loudmouth out of the crowd and shoot him right in the face with that at 10, 12 feet. And it was tear gas, only it's liquid form. Shoot somebody in the face with it, it takes a pretty tough man to stay on his feet when you get shot in the face with mace. They don't use mace anymore. They use, I guess, nowadays they use this shocker thing that they shoot you with two wires on it that shocks you, and that takes you right down too, I guess.
Yeah, taser.
Taser, yeah.
Yeah. So did you have rifles in those days, or was that something that you didn't feel you needed?
Some of the guys a couple of guys carried rifles. One of the fellows that I come to mind carried a 30-30 carbine, which, as you know, Winchester Model 94 30-30 carbine carries 9 30-30 shells. And so that's a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
And another guy carried some kind of a rifle like that. But most of us, and in fact, in our police cars, we had 12-gauge shotguns, pump-action shotguns, and they had 7 rounds in them. And they were mounted on a bracket on the dash. So if you had to take your gun with you on the way out of the car, you could push a button and it unsnap that, and you could just take it on out with you.
Yeah.
And I can tell you a story about an incident with that later if you would like.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it now.
Well, okay. I was out patrolling in the county one day, and there's a road out there called 5 Mile Road. Anyway, I got a call by Ted Dykus. Ted was a desk sergeant, and he called me and on the radio, and my call number was 2213. I was the only officer in the department that would take the number 13 as part of my call letter because I'm not superstitious. And also because I was the 13th officer in order of rank in the department. Uh-huh. Out of about 50 or 60 guys, I was number 13 from the top. So anyway, I was out patrolling and I got a radio call to call this office right away on the phone. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So I went to a little gas station there on 5 Mile and got out and called in on the payphone. And Sergeant Dykus told me that there's a guy that has he's getting a divorce from his wife. She's got a restraining order to keep him away because he's violent. He's beat her up a number of times, and she finally got fed up with it and was divorcing him. And anyway, he came over to the house and beat her up, and he was in the house, and she broke out and ran over to the neighbors and called the sheriff's department. And Ted said, I'm sending another officer along to help you. It's Officer Dave Rowe, who was the chief deputy. He was number 2 in rank in the department. And he said, he'll be right there. And I said, okay. And so I went in the vicinity, just up the street a little ways from this place. Oh, and the guy said the wife says he's going to said he'd kill the police when they showed up. He had guns and stuff. So I waited, and when I saw Dave Rowe's car pull in behind mine, I pulled on down to the address. And I drove past the house and turned into the neighbor's driveway. And my in my patrol car. And Dave Rowe pulled up and stopped right in front of the house. Well, this guy was in the house looking out, and he was really, really crazy mad. And he didn't see me drive by. He saw the car go by, I suppose, but we had identical cars. Next thing he knew, this car was parked in front of his house. He didn't know I was in another car there. Anyway, I pulled up in the neighbor's driveway, and before either one of us could get out of our police car, this guy came out on the front porch. And it was one of those concrete porches without any rails or anything, just a porch landing.
Yeah.
3 steps up from the sidewalk or from the walkway. Came out with a rifle in his hands, and he got the drop on Dave Rowe and pulled right up and was aiming at him before Rowe could even get out of his car. Well, I was kind of a young kid. I'd only been a policeman about a year. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And so it's kind of frightening at first, but I uttered a little prayer in my mind. I probably didn't say it verbally out loud, but your readers and your listeners need to know I am and always have been a pretty religious guy. And at least I think I am. And so I offered a little prayer, and the fear went away. I was afraid, and the fear went away. I unsnapped my shotgun and got out of the car. And when I did that, while I was doing that, the guy ran the world and went back in his house. While I was in the house, I pumped a 12-gauge shell into that shotgun. And you have to know that those 12-gauge shotguns that we used, we had them loaded with double-aught buckshot.
Yeah.
They were not scatter guns like you'd hunt ducks with. Double-aught buckshot is a 12-gauge shotgun shell with 9 lead pellets in it, about the size of a 22 slug.
Yeah.
There's 9 of those in there. And they do a heck of a lot of damage if you shot somebody with one of them. Well, by the time I got it levered in and stuff, Dave Rowe had opened his car door and was stepping out again. And this guy came back out on the porch, yelling and screaming and cussing and threatening, waving this gun at Rowe. And Rowe had to stay behind his door. Those police car doors are reinforced with metal sheets. You can stand behind a police car door and shoot it all day. And if there's a policeman behind it, it's not going to hurt him unless you go through the window where his head might be and shoulders. But the door itself will stop bullets in police cars. So if you ever decide to kill a policeman, don't shoot at him through the door. It won't work.
Yeah, don't kill any policemen.
No, just bounce off and make him mad at you.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I realized at that moment that he was all this. His name was so many years ago. I don't think I'll use his name even yet. He's probably got kids, and I don't know where this recording might go. But this guy, I'll just call him the guy. This guy, I realized he hadn't seen me. He didn't know I was there. To see me, all he had to do was turn his head to the left. I was right there in his line of vision if he just turned his head. But he was too busy watching Dave Rowe, which was kind of to his right a little bit. And so when I realized he didn't know I was there, being as young as I was and not really experienced, I figured I'll just walk up close enough and get the drop on him and tell him to drop his gun. So that's what I did. I got about 10 feet from him and held my gun ready, ready arms, and said, "Okay, drop your rifle." And the guy then turned his head and saw me.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't drop his rifle. He whirled his body over toward me and pulled that rifle up and aimed it right at my face. And I pulled my shotgun up, and remember now, I'd already loaded it, and it was cocked. It was ready, pulling the trigger, and it would go off. I pulled that shotgun up, and I aimed it right at his chest. I was calm as a summer morning. The Lord had blessed me to be calm. I was not afraid anymore. I was completely in control of what I was doing.
Yeah.
I pulled my shotgun up and aimed it right at his chest, took the slack up in the trigger, and Dave Rowe knew that somebody was going to get killed, and he started screaming as loud as he could to distract this guy. And it worked. Just before my shotgun fired, it would have been a millisecond longer because I'd taken up the slack and I was squeezing one off. and it would have fired
Yeah.
any second. Anyway, Dave yelling over there distracted the guy enough that he turned his attention back to Dave and was screaming and yelling and ranting and raving. And I realized that, this isn't going to work. I've got to disarm this guy.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I don't know for sure how all departments train policemen, but my guess is nowadays that guy would be dead.
Probably. Yeah.
But in those days, our training was only kill if you have to, absolutely have to. And that was my frame of mind. I didn't want to kill anybody, even though I was prepared to if I had to. Well, while he was screaming and yelling at Dave, I stepped up about 5 feet from him, just at the bottom of the steps, maybe 3-4 feet. And I sprayed him in the face with mace, which blinded him. Remember now, most people just shoot him with mace in the face and they drop like a sack of potatoes. But he didn't. All it did was make him mad and blind.
Yeah.
He took his rifle, he switched it around and took it by the barrel like it was a ball bat.
Yeah.
What an idiot. And he started swinging it blindly.
Yeah.
And he was up on the porch 3 steps above me, and I was down below him. And I realized that, he's swinging way over my head. So I uncocked my shotgun so that it wouldn't go off. I stepped up under his arms. He was swinging that shotgun. Stepped up under his arm, and my old Army training kicked in, and I gave him a vertical butt stroke under the chin with the shotgun, butt of that shotgun. His arms flew up in the air, and he had the rifle in his left hand, and I grabbed it just as he went flying off the porch into the flower beds. Semi-conscious. It knocked him almost completely out cold, and he's laying there moaning, and I had his rifle in one hand and my shotgun in the other, and Dave Rowe jumped on top of him and rolled him over and handcuffed him. And the 2 things that happened in that incident, remembering now that I'd only been a policeman about a year.
Yeah.
Never had anything like that ever happen in my life. And I found out a couple of things that I needed to learn. Every policeman needs to know this. The first one is, do you have the will to be violent if you have to? If you can't, then don't be a policeman, because someday in your police work, you're going to have to be meaner than the other guy.
Right.
And the other thing I learned is, can you kill somebody if you have to? And even though I didn't kill him, I came within a millisecond of killing him. And I learned that day that, yeah, you can do this if you have to. Those 2 things gave me the advantage for the rest of my career as a policeman, knowing that I could follow through and do the job if I had to. And so that was a valuable lesson and an exciting time, and it only lasted about less than a minute, probably, from the time we pulled up and stopped to the time he was in handcuffs sitting in the back of Dave Rowe's car.
So you mentioned your training. What types of training did your department have? Did you have a lot of hands-on training? Was it, explain to the listeners what your training entailed in those days?
Well, of course, you do a lot of shooting, target shooting and moving target shooting and silhouette shooting, a lot of that, so that you can take that 4.5-inch barrel on your revolver. Remember, those are short barrels because they're easier to carry. And they're not like Wyatt Earp, who had a 10 or 12-inch barrel on his big old 44. But you do a lot of shooting so you can get proficient at shooting with your sidearm, with your revolver. You do a lot of that. And then you do a lot of self-defense training. And we had a guy that was in our department. His name was Bob Taylor. I tell you his name because this is not a bad thing about him. Bob was a black belt holder in 2 or 3 different martial arts, including judo, karate, and aikido.
Uh-huh.
Aikido, I don't know if it's even used anymore, but aikido is a series of grabs and holds that you can put on a person that, used appropriately and quickly, you'll take all the fight out of them in a hurry. and as old as I am, and has been as long as it's been since I have done that, most people I could grab them, and then in less than a second they'd be on their knees begging for mercy just by grabbing them by the hand and doing a certain thing you know how to do if you know Aikido well.
Yeah.
Or you can pull a guy over around you and get a headlock on him, but you never put your arm bone against the guy's Adam apple. That'll kill him, crush him, kill him. You put the center of your elbow on his Adam's apple and just squeeze. What it does, it shuts off the blood going to his brain, and he passes out, and he'll be out for about 10 seconds, which is long enough for you to roll him over and handcuff him.
And that was an approved method for control in those days. Okay.
I'm assuming it still is. I wouldn't know. Maybe with these tasers, they don't need to do that kind of stuff anymore. But we were told by this Bob Taylor, who knew it a lot. He said, pick about 4 takedowns and about 4 holds and practice them until they're reflex action.
Yeah.
That's all you need. And so I did that. And even today, when I'm scrambling around with my grandsons, sometimes I'll grab them in a hold without even thinking about it because it's reflex, even after all these years. But I can tell you that you can take somebody right down on their knees and they'll pee their pants and cry for mercy with some of the holds that I learned.
Yeah, I remember those. I had my share when I was a kid.
Or you can take somebody clear out and put them unconscious for a short period of time.
Yeah.
You don't want to take them out, be unconscious too long, because what you're doing is you're shutting off the blood to their brain, and you don't want to do that for more than a few seconds or it will cause brain damage.
Right.
So you don't do it for more than a few seconds, 10 seconds at the most. Long enough to handcuff them.
Yeah.
But those are the things we did in those days. And then, of course, you have nightstick training to learn how to use that nightstick. Because if you're going to go into a barroom brawl, which I did a few times, several times, and start whacking people with your nightstick to end the fighting, and here you got 7 or 8 grown men laying on the floor moaning and crying because you just got hit hard with a nightstick somewhere where it hurts. So that kind of training was very valuable to us.
Yeah.
You never get out of your police car and go anywhere without slipping the nightstick into its holster. Take it
So
with you.
in your car, I guess you wouldn't be wearing that. It'd be too.
No, it would be, there's a little holder there beside you.
Yeah.
And you just stick it in that holder. And then as you get out of the car, you pull it out and drop it in the holster. If you're right-handed, you put it on your left side. If you're left-handed, you put it on the right side. So you can reach across your body and get it quickly.
So describe in the 60s, there may be some people listening to this podcast that don't understand the way society was in those days. Describe the types of people that lived in and around Boise in those days that you had to deal with occasionally.
Well, in those days, and I don't know if it's changed all that much, except the attitude of the people are probably a little different because there's a lot more crazies out there than there was in our day.
Uh-huh.
But, if you have to arrest somebody, if you're pulling a violator over to stop them, that's usually just a fairly routine thing, although you never treat anything routine until you're done doing what you have to do. You stop a violator, you don't just assume that they're going to be nice and keep their hands on the steering wheel. In fact, you tell them before you get out of the car, put your hands on the wheel, keep them in plain sight. All of your passengers, put your hands on the dashboard or on the back of the seat in front of you. Keep them there.
Yeah.
Make sure nobody's going to come at you with a weapon. Anyway, the kind of people that you're stopping, even though most of them, 80% of them are probably nice people just in a hurry to get home from work, or they're late for work or whatever. The other 10 or 15% are crazies. Even in those days, they were crazies.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're drunk, and drunks, a lot of the time, a drunk just thinks he's Arnold Schwarzenegger or somebody.
Yeah.
And they want to fight. And you can't stand there and get in a fist fight with some big burly drunk. I got a story about that I'll tell you in a minute.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to take them down immediately, take them out.
Right.
So you have to be tough enough and have this training to do that.
Yeah.
You can't wrestle around. You get your uniform ripped off of you or something. or he might get hold of your gun. Who knows?
Yeah, that could happen.
There's ways to do that without spending all your time getting your uniform dirty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
tell us about the drunk.
Well, I was following there's a little country bar up the road a ways, and I was up there, and this good drunk guy was coming from it. I saw him pull out of the parking lot. His car was weaving all over the road, and I did a U-turn and pulled in behind him and flipped my lights on, and he wouldn't stop. He was drunk, and I honked the horn a few times, and he wouldn't stop. And so finally, realizing that he's going to hit somebody pretty quick because he was all over the road, I flipped the siren on, and that got his attention, and he pulled over and stopped. And I went up to him, and he was such a big guy. I had to arrest him because for drunk driving. He was so big that my handcuffs would not go around his wrist. That's how big he was. But after talking to him for a minute and helping him get out of his car and get him over to the police car, I realized this guy's harmless. You know, he kept yelling, "Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler."
Yeah.
But that was just, I don't know what it was. But I realized he's not going to fight. I got him and put him in the back seat of the car, and we had a kick-proof plastic plexiglass screen between the front and back seat. So if he decided to kick me in the back of the head, he could kick till his leg wore out, and he wouldn't be able to kick me because that screen was up.
Right.
You know, and some cars that had Boise City cars had wire mesh, expanded metal mesh, but people can spit through those.
Right.
And we had the plastics that you couldn't spit through them either. Anyway, I took him in and put him in jail, and that was kind of funny, that little story. And there was another time.
Oh, go ahead.
There was another time I frequently, probably about every 10th arrest you make, the guy wants to fight. That was in those days. It may be more frequent now. But about every 10th guy, if you average it out, it'd be about every 10th person would want to fight you. And you don't fight them. You don't get in a slug out with somebody. They might whip you. There's a lot of guys out there tougher than you are, you know. So you mace them, or you hit them with your nightstick, or you hit them on the butt or the thigh right there just below their butt with that nightstick, and they won't want to fight anymore. They're ready to lay in the back seat of your car with handcuffs on and cry because it hurts to get hit in the butt with a nightstick or on the top of the shoulder. You always hit them where there's some meat. You never hit them where there's a bone you can break. You don't want to break a bone. You don't hit them on the head ever.
Right.
Anyway.
So what, when you're dealing with people, and obviously police work is dealing with people.
Yeah.
And I think most people have heard of the phrase police discretion and being able to choose the method to gain someone's compliance to whatever it is you need them to do.
Yeah.
Even if they're breaking a law and you have to arrest them, at some point, you know, you're either going to handcuff them and take them to your car to put them under arrest. But at some level there, you have to gain compliance.
Yeah.
And in using that discretion, what did you find worked the best with people? And I'm sure there were a lot of variables, but overall, would you say it was easier to deal with people if you treated them with respect, or if you just immediately used force? What was your finding on that?
That's a good question. A good, well-trained policeman, even today, if he stops you for something, he will probably call you sir or ma'am. He'll be very polite and very courteous. Don't let that fool you. He's watching you close. If you make a overt move or some kind, you're liable to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But I was always very polite and courteous. And when I'd stop a traffic violator, if it was for reckless driving or anything worse, drunk driving, reckless driving, speed over maybe 15 miles over the limit, any of those, there was going to be a ticket written.
Yeah.
Reckless driving, drunk driving, of course, you arrest them and take them in. We didn't let them reckless driving was serious enough that you couldn't let them go on down the road, because that means they're out of control person.
Yeah.
They may not be drunk. They might just be nuts,
Yeah.
But in other violations or other situations, like a family fight, things like that, you talk to them. And if they're reasonable and they're calm and they're not angry, and you're trained after a while, so you can tell whether they're lying to you, which about 50% of people will do. They'll lie to you.
Yeah.
In those days, maybe more now, I don't know. But if you decide that this person has learned their lesson and they don't need other than a warning, that's what you give them as a warning. Tell them, now slow her down and take it easy. And, I could write you up and tell them it costs about, in those days it was $5 a mile. So if you're going 100 miles an hour, you're going to get arrested.
Yeah.
But if you're going 10, 15 miles over the limit, you're going to get, and you behave yourself and are polite and show some remorse, you probably just get a warning in those days. I don't know how they do it now. That's what we do. I've never rude to anybody until I reached a point where rudeness was the only thing left to do. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
And I was always very courteous and polite to people. And as far as I know, all the officers in our department were. Anybody that was an arrogant smart aleck wouldn't work for Paul Bright for very long. If he found out about it, they'd be gone. Because he wouldn't have people doing that. I mean, that's an elected office. If you get mad at a deputy, you're mad at the sheriff, and he won't get elected next election. And that wasn't the only reason. Though. Part of the reason is Paul Bright was just a good person, and he expected his officers to be good people.
Right. So in closing for this show, there was a picture, I think, that ran in one of the Boise newspapers about you arresting a rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell our listeners that story and maybe a little background on that?
Sure. Just kind of a fun thing. I was just patrolling along down the road and on the north side of Boise, just out of the city limits a little ways. And I looked down and there was a rabbit just hopping along the side of the road. He was a little brown rabbit. And when I went by him, I figured he'd take off, across the field. He didn't. He just stopped and went up on his hind legs and looked at me. And I thought, this is cool. So I stopped my police car and I got out of it and I walked. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, as I recall. I walked back there and the rabbit just stood there and looked at me, and I leaned down and petted him and talked to him, and he just gussied up to me. So I picked him up and held him in my hand and was petting him. He's obviously somebody's tame rabbit.
Right.
I went to the nearest house there and knocked on the door, and I said, hey, I found this rabbit. Does he belong to you? And the lady said, no, we don't own rabbits, and none of our neighbors do. But a lot of times people will just bring animals out here and kick them out of the car because they think we'll adopt them.
Right.
And that's probably what this is just a rabbit that nobody wanted anymore. So anyway, I took the rabbit into my police car and took him back to the station. And just so happened that a photographer from the Boise Statesman, that's the big newspaper in Boise, was there. And he took a picture of me and that rabbit. And I was sitting there writing on a pad, and the picture of the rabbit. And then the caption under the picture, when it came out in the paper, was Deputy Hicks arrests a rabbit for vagrancy. Vagrancy in those days was legal. It's not anymore. But vagrancy is if you have no visible means of support, you're a bum, you're bumming around town, you can be arrested for it.
Okay.
Not anymore.
Thanks for listening. Growing up in Idaho, the good old days.